Murders at Karlov Manor has fully been previewed at this point, and Jake and I have done our investigation and moved through it like good little detectives and found our favorite new commander cards from the set.
If you're here because you haven't looked at the set, you're in the right place. We've picked out the best cards for you. Highest level of gratitude to our patrons who power the channel through Patreon. Check out the Patreon link in the description to learn about monthly giveaways, VIP Discord access, and even our official playmat. Thank you so much to our sponsors, Card Conduit, which is a great spot to sell your singles, TCG Player, which is a great marketplace with tons of different sellers where you can buy your singles, Dragon Shield, which is a great spot to put your singles into sleeves and protect them, and Moxfield, which is an awesome place to sort all your cards and keep track of your favorite decks. Hello and welcome to the day.
Thank you for spending your time with us.
I'm Jake.
I'm Joel. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. Jake, we've got a host of cards here in no particular
22
order.
of them.
That's right. We don't have these in any like ranked order. These are just our 22 new favorite commander cards from the set. Typically with these, we focus on the 99. We'll have a different video looking at cards that we love out of the command zone, new legends. But we will start with a legend that I think will be great in the 99, Jake. Delny Streetwise Lookout, a white and 2 for a 2/2 human scout. Creatures you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater, and if an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. I'm just gonna name 2, Dockside Extortionist, Orcish Bowmasters. Is that enough to justify why this card is good?
Yeah, it's just Panharmonicon for low power stuff is a good way to describe it. You're just getting extra triggers, and whenever something extra happens and you get something for free, it's powerful.
Yeah, also really good at helping punch those creatures that are power 2 or less that have like, when this deals combat damage, helps punch those through, you know?
Yes, next up we have Crime Novelist. For 1 red and 2 other, you get a 1/3 Goblin Bard. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, put a 1/1 counter on Crime Novelist and add red. So you're sacrificing things, just think treasure, for example. Every single time you sacrifice a treasure, you're putting a 1/1 counter on this and you're adding red. There's a lot of degenerate things you can do with this. I know that, Joel, you already have figured out a way to like go infinite with this card. Is that right?
Yeah, I didn't figure it out, but somebody on the internet did post a combo that I made into a short that is an infinite combo with Crime Novelist and Animation Module. You know, creating some servos, sacking those servos to like Ashnod's Altar. We sacked an artifact. We got 2 mana from the altar. We got a mana from the Crime Novelist. It goes nuts, and then you just loop it. This is just a nice little combo-y dude. I'm a big fan of the Novelist here. Our little Goblin Bard is pretty sweet. Got another red mythic here for you. 2 red, 4 other, 6/6 Flying Trampling Dragon. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may collect Evidence X, which is exiling cards with mana value from your graveyard, and you add all those mana values together to equal whatever number you're trying to get to, in this case X. When you do, Incinerator of the Guilty deals X damage to each creature and each planeswalker that player controls. So Incinerator of the Guilty attacks, tramples over and just deals 1 damage. That's all we needed to do. Now we're going to remove total CMC 5. We're going to take a 3 mana card and a 2 mana card, exile them from our graveyard, and deal 5 to their entire line and all of their planeswalkers. That should wipe most boards, right?
What's pretty cool about it is it's kind of flexible as well. If you want to collect Evidence X and get rid of an 8 cost and a 10 cost because for some reason all their creatures are 18/18, this is going to be a card that you can do it. So it's an interesting card. It's got flexibility. That's what makes it cool.
Yeah.
Makes it good.
Slap a Basilisk collar on here. Collect
Also,
Evidence.
it's a dragon.
1. Yeah, dragons are cool, right?
Yeah, here's a insane rate for 4 mana. 2 red, 2 other for a 4/4 Flying Trample. Whenever Krenko's Buzz Crusher enters the battlefield, for each player, destroy up to 1 non-basic land that player controls. For each land destroyed this way, its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. So it's got like a Field of Ruin type effect or like a Ghost Quarter type effect. I mean, a 4/4 flyer for 4 with Trample is already pretty good. All this extra text is just really nice for EDH because you're able to clean up those pesky lands, stuff like, I don't know, Urborg, Cabal Coffers, freaking Gaia's Cradle, you name it. There's a lot of really nice non-basic lands to destroy.
I love the fact too that destroy up to one non-basic land does not include the word target. And as far as I've seen from Wizards, that was on purpose. This is intended to destroy Lotus Fields, any lands that have hexproof. If all of your opponent's lands have hexproof for some reason, Buzz Crusher doesn't care. Buzz Crusher will just come in and destroy that non-basic land even if it has hexproof, and then okay, you get a basic land in return. That's fine. Also flexibility here, Jake. You can target yourself if you need to go get a landfall trigger, maybe if you need to just get rid of it, go get another basic land, kind of Ponza thing going on. Get Krenko's Buzz Crusher. This is one of the craziest rares in the set, but I mean, at instant speed, Archdruid's Charm, 3 mana, green, 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 choose one. Search your library for a creature or land, that does not say basic land, or land, and reveal it, put it onto the battlefield tapped. Otherwise, put it in your hand and shuffle. You're putting it onto the battlefield tapped if it's a land, not if it's a creature. So you've got a creature or just any land tutor, and if it's a land, it's straight onto the battlefield. 3 mana, instant speed. You can also, if you want to, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control and have it one-sided fight something, or exile target artifact or enchantment. Not a terrible 3 modes. In fact, it's excellent when all 3 modes are ridiculously spiky.
So this is the second charm in a cycle that looks like it began in Modern Horizons 1. So we had a blue charm that came out first that was 3 blue for choose one, and it has counter target spell, target player draws 2 cards, or gain control of target non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less. And so I like this. Yeah. You know, figuring out ways to complete cycles is always something that players like. So now we know that we have a blue charm, we have a green charm. We'll be waiting for, you know, the red, white, and black charms in the future, and they should all be equally as pushed. The blue one is pretty good. You're able to take control of someone's Soul Ring, for example. This is pretty strong as well, being able to instant speed go grab any land and put it onto the battlefield.
Thespian Stage.
Yeah, anything. Field of the Dead is like one of my least favorite cards of all time. Like I honestly hate Field of the Dead more than like any other Magic the Gathering card. And it's probably because I play a good bit of Timeless right now, and Field of the Dead is just such a pushed and busted card, and it's so easy to get with stuff like Prime Time and stuff. Thank God we don't have to deal with any of that in Commander, and there's only one Field of Dead in Field of the Dead in Commander, and when you destroy it, it's gone.
Archdruid's Charm is pretty good, excellent, just modes up and down it. This one's an interesting one, Jake. I'll do this one. You can hit the next 2. Hard-hitting question. This is the first time we have seen this effect for 1 mana. 1 green mana, sorcery speed. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. Typically, this effect costs 2. We have seen a similar effect for 1 red, where you can have an opponent's creature deal damage equal to its power to another opponent's creature, to another creature of that opponent's, I should say. But for 1 green, your creature to a target creature or planeswalker you don't control. This is the best rate we've had for this effect. So I always seem to find a 1 mana uncommon that I just fall in love with. And for me, that's hard-hitting question in this set. Pretty straightforward card, though. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. But Undergrowth Recon, not as straightforward.
Undergrowth Recon is just a very good enchantment. It's going to remind you of stuff like Crucible Worlds. 2 green, 1 other. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So if you like Ramanop Excavator, if you like Crucible of Worlds, if you like cards and you need to get your lands back, this is redundancy for that.
There's that cycle of lands that came out in Capenna, I believe it was, where when they enter the battlefield, you automatically sack them and go get a basic of the tricolors that it represents. This is kind of nutty with that, because at the beginning of your upkeep, basically it's just like go get the exact basic you need to finish out your mana, you know, and just keep ramping up. So
it also plays beautifully with fetch lands as well. Just get your fetch land back, use it again, go get your, it depends on how sweaty you are, but if you're playing dual lands, go get your dual lands, get your fetches back, get your shocks, get your fetches back, get your triomes, get your fetches back. There's so much that you could do with fetch lands. I mean, this is a card that plays beautifully with those. It might even be a card because it's 3 mana, because it's harder to kill than Ramanop Excavator. Possibly it makes its way into some constructed, but for Commander, it seems like a shoe-in for a lot of decks.
Oh yeah, lots of decks are going to want that one.
Next up, we have Doppelgang, and for 1 green, 1 blue, and XXX, meaning each of those costs need to be equal in order to get that effect. You have a sorcery speed for each of X target permanents. Create X tokens that are copies of that permanent. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and so on is what you're going to have to pay in addition to that blue and that green in order to get that rate for each of those permanents.
Yeah,
it's just a big splashy Simic spell in the colors where you're doing all the ramping, where late game you can just copy a bunch of stuff and hopefully that's enough to win the game.
I love it. Target permanents, y'all. You can target lands with this. You just get, like Jake said, you dump those amounts of mana in there as you have it available to you. You can make a copy, 1 copy of 1 target, 2 copies of 2 targets, and all the way up. It's just kind of a silly giant Simic card. Let's go the other way with this one. Instead of paying a ton of mana, let's just pay 2 and get incremental value for the rest of the game. An enchantment for a black and green is Insidious Roots. It says creature tokens you control have tap to add a mana of any color. Wow, this is an uncommon. And it has more text. Whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 0/1 green plant creature token, then put a +1/+1 counter on each plant you control. Those tokens, by the way, now tap for mana. This card is insane for 2 mana at uncommon.
The art on it is really interesting as well. I'm going to have to take some more time and take a look at the art on this. But yeah, the card itself is very strong, giving all of your tokens tap. It's a prismatic omen for your tokens. It's just like, it's pretty good.
Yeah, crazy. It's crazy some of the uncommons we've seen in this set.
And next up we have Kylox's Volt Strider, 1 red, 1 blue, and 1 other. And this card is going to give you some redundancy. Artifact vehicle, it's a 4/4 vehicle. Collect evidence 6, which we've already talked about. Kylox's Volt Strider becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. So you can crew this by exiling cards from your graveyard. And then when it attacks, you may cast an instant or sorcery spell from among cards exiled with it. So you would want to put this in like a blue-red or blue-red X spell slinger kind of thing. That way you can get redundancy. I think this card is going to really shine in Limited, but I do know that some people really like to get a lot out of their graveyard and Commander. And so this card is likely going to do some shenanigans.
Yeah, if you've got a nice suite of 2 and 3 mana instant and sorcery spells that are not counter spells, this card is an excellent inclusion in your deck because those attack triggers, letting you recast those things, whether it's just dig down 3, put 1 in your hand, or whether it's, bolt something or whatever the effect is. This is the kind of card that young Joel would have built around so fast. Cards like 1 mana, 2 mana, creature can't be blocked this turn. That's the kind of stuff that I would run alongside this in like a constructed deck. But there is definitely a part of me that thinks Commander players might want this in a spellcasty deck,
I am actually like wondering if like CEDH wants this, because CEDH casts so many instants and sorceries, and you're able to crew it without creatures, and so it's like you don't even really need like that whole aspect of your deck. You just need to be able to collect a lot of evidence in order to crew it. And so I wonder if this is actually a card that breaks into some of the sweatiest formats.
It's interesting
because in CEDH you actually do care about spells like Lightning Bolt and all of your tutors, because if you're running like Nagila, for example, you're running Worldly, Enlightened, you're running like Vampiric. There's so many different personal or mystical tutor. It's just like there's so many different things that you can do with this, and I'd actually be interested to maybe crack in and talk to some of our friends that cover sweatier formats to see what they're thinking about something like this. Maybe we will after this.
Mythic vehicle here. Yeah, I mean, low CMC formats, exiling a bunch of 1 and 2 mana cost spells could be good. Treacherous Graves, a 3 mana spell, a black, a white, and 1 for an instant speed. It says, as an additional cost to cast this, sack a creature that dealt damage this turn. Think token decks. Think I swung with 5 1/1 flying spirits and 3 of them got through. We're going to sacrifice 1 of those spirits. We're going to draw 3 cards. Each opponent's going to lose 3 life, and we're going to gain 3 life. The thing I like about this is it's in the sacrifice deck colors. This synergy is everywhere in Commander, and it's not going to be that difficult in Commander to sack a creature that dealt damage this turn. to get 3 cards for 3 mana at instant speed and deal 9 damage total and you gain 3. It's just a lot at instant speed for 3 mana.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. Sacrificing a token is nothing. And yeah, in Aristocrats, I mean, it's probably going to do something good for you when you sack it, and then you're also drawing 3. And then if you're in a full pod, your opponents are losing 9 life, you know, collectively, and then you have that gain 3 there. It's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it.
Urgent Necropsy.
Dude, every single time I've seen this card, my brain stops at that word too. Necropsy is what
I hate what they named this. 1 green, 1 black, and 2 other for an instant speed. As an additional cost to cast this spell, collect evidence X, where X is the total mana value of the permanents this spell targets. Destroy up to 1 target artifact, up to 1 target creature, up to 1 target enchantment, and up to 1 target planeswalker. So it's just a suite of cleanup. It should remind you of stuff like Wrecking Ball or whatever that card is. Hull Breach.
Right. Yeah, so let's do an example here. We want to destroy the Arcane Signet, so that's 2. We want to destroy their Zeus of Lost But Seeking, so that's 5 total, and we want to destroy their Smothering Tithe, another Smothering Tithe on the battlefield, and we'll just say there's no Planeswalker here, so we got 5 across the artifact and the creature, 4 more for the enchantment. We're going to exile 9 mana cost from our graveyard, so a 5 and a 4, 3 3s, you know how to get to 9 via various numbers, and that's going to let us destroy that Arcane Signet, that Azusa, and that Smothering Tithe for 4 mana at instant speed. In a deck that wants this card, the Evidence 6 I don't think is going to be as big a deal as it seems to decks that aren't actively dumping stuff into their graveyard, you know? I think this is a 99 for a straight up graveyard deck, but the opposite is a kind of creature deck go wide thing, and that's what War Leader's Call is going to apply to. A white, a red, and 1 for an enchantment that says creatures you control get +1/+1, Baby Anthem, typical Anthem, and whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. The exact same text as Impact Tremors. They have taken an Anthem and stapled it to an Impact Tremors, added 1 mana, and said, here you go, 3 mana rare enchantment. This card is bonkers, and it's going to get played in so many decks. Lots of damage to be thrown around if you're creating lots of token creatures.
And then next up, we have assembled the players. For 1 white and 1 other, we have an enchantment. It's my favorite permanent type. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. Sweet. And once each turn, you may cast a creature spell with power 2 or less from the top of your library. Obviously, this is going to combo well with anything that rearranges the top of your library, like a Sensei's Divining Top. Obviously, this wants to go in a deck that runs creatures, low to the ground creatures, something like, I don't know, Lurrus. I don't know if people play Lurrus, but that comes to mind in my when I think about it. So yeah, it's a fine card, and it's just a way to get velocity. Play cards off the top of your deck. That way you don't have to play them from your hand, and you can keep digging and find those answers, that kind of thing.
Aristocrats decks, a lot of the creatures that are heavy hitters in that deck are 0 power, 1 power, 2 power. You know, and that's not to mention like Selesnya weenie decks that just want to go wide with 1/1s and then pump them up with a card like War Leader's Call, like we just saw in a Boros deck for white weenie or Boros weenie. I think that, you know, any kind of velocity like this, Oracle of Moldiah for power 2 or less creatures, that's going to be pretty solid. We've got a new type, a new card type in this set called Cases. This is the Case of the Ransacked Lab. 3 mana, enchantment. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, so you get that off the rip. Then to solve this one, you've got to cast 4 or more instant and sorcery spells this turn. Then, once it's solved, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card. It's just good value over time for a spell casting card. Right, exactly. It's not difficult to cast 4 or more instant sorcery spells in the type of deck that would run this card. It's also reducing their cost. To mind. Exactly. Yeah. And you're refilling your hand on every cast at that point. So for 3 mana, I feel like your passive that you get just for having this on the battlefield is already good enough to start justifying it, and then you just get value from there.
Yeah, I have to agree. Once you solve it, it's just shenanigans.
Yeah.
Just absolute shenanigans. And yeah, at the top, you can already see it has like a Goblin Electromancer type effect going on. You can kind of see exactly where it's supposed to slot just based on archetype.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And then this card, it's funny, Wizards of the Coast every now and again will give us some big blue busted thing that you can either get from exile or cast for free. And that's what Conspiracy Unraveler does. 2 blue and 5 other, but you don't really care about the casting cost. For this big 6/6 flying Sphinx Detective, you may collect evidence 10 rather than pay the mana cost for spells that you cast. Okay, so that's like all spells.
Yes, that's what
Pretty
it is.
big deal.
Right. I mean, you drop this for 7 for sure. But then at that point, all you got to do to cast anything is remove 2 5-cost cards from your graveyard. A 5 and a 3 and a 2. You know, you just got to evidence 10 for any spell.
Yeah, so I do need to correct myself. You're not going to be able to cheat this out, but once you get it out, you are going to be able to cheat other stuff out. Yes. And that is where things can get really crazy. Late game EDH, getting stuff back or casting stuff, you know, getting stuff back from the graveyard is one thing. Being able to use the graveyard to cast stuff as well, in addition to other stuff that you need to cast, that's a big deal. You can pretty much like empty your hand with a big enough graveyard here.
Or you can tap out. That's what I love about this. I think that people are going to go, well, what are you casting where you're exiling mana value 10 total from your graveyard? And I'm like, bro, tapped out casting counterspell. I don't care. I want to exile 2 5-mana things from my graveyard when I'm tapped out and cast counterspell for free for somebody who thinks they've got me. That's all I want to do. I don't know what you want to do with it. There's probably a ton of applications.
It's pretty good.
So many applications. But just keep it simple, baby. Get a 6/6 flyer out there, and now you can cast free spells. Crazy
stuff
mythic.
like Blasphemous Act becomes extremely strong.
Ridiculous.
With that card.
100%.
You know, like,
oh my god, yes, dude. Treasure Cruise. That is going to really
dig through time.
Yes,
anything with Delve makes that card better. You know, like there's a lot going on with that card. Forensic Gadgeteer, 1 blue and 2 other for a 2/3 Vidalcan Artificer Detective. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, investigate. We know what that is. And activated abilities of artifacts you control cost 1 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana cost to less than 1 mana. So anything that's an artifact with an activation cost is going to be less. So all of your clues, your foods, your treasure only costs 1, so that won't cost less. But you know, and then additionally, you know, anything like monoliths that come to mind, any like that kind of thing.
Now you're cooking. That's what I'm loving.
This is a card that seems like it's pretty strong at a rare.
There's not a lot of cards that reduce activated abilities of artifacts. I know this because right when that Clue Commander was announced, I was like, okay, well, I want to see if I can reduce the cost of sacking clues to 1 or 0 so that it's free card draw for me and I can sack them at instant speed for no mana, etc. That card didn't exist. Me and the Discord looked. We went digging. We were like, well, you can do this. Well, you can do this. But now we have a card that straight up reduces clue token activations. And not only that, but reduces all artifact activations. Don't underestimate 1 reduce, y'all. 1 reduction is pretty strong. It's stronger than it seems, I promise. I want to talk about Lost in the Maze, 2 blue X enchantment that's got flash. And there's different ways to look at this card, y'all. It's great. Enters the battlefield, you tap X target creatures, put a stun counter on each of those creatures you don't control. So you can tap your own stuff, you can tap your opponent's stuff, and they get stun counters. Then it says tapped creatures you control have hexproof. So on a 2-mana enchantment, any of your creatures that have crewed a vehicle, attacked, tapped to pay some other cost, have hexproof. So anything that's going to allow you to tap your creatures at instant speed is going to basically allow you to provide your creatures hexproof at instant speed. That's what Lost in the Maze does, while also being a little offensive as well. You can cast this, target your own stuff, give your own stuff hexproof as a response. Then, if you want, you can also use it as, well, I'm going to pay a couple extra mana into it. I'm going to tap down, 2 of Jake's creatures, and that's going to allow me to get through. And not only tapping him down, but he's not going to be able to untap him at the beginning of his next turn. This card's pretty crazy.
It is pretty crazy. I like this one a lot. Being able, dude, those stun counters are so strong. And a lot of people will be like, oh no, in Commander, it's like, it's not a big enough effect or something. But honestly, you know, Commander comes down to like, once the game comes to a head, it's only like a few turns before it ends. So like having something like this to detain something really important, it can be very impactful.
Yeah.
Even if you just get it once.
Stun counters
it can
are nuts.
be very impactful.
In Commander.
They really are. They can just, yeah, I mean, they're honestly, it's such a strong effect.
If I'm going after you, Jake, and at your EOT, I cast this and tap down your only 3 creatures, they're going to get stun counters. They're going to be tapped. You're going to be completely tapped out creature-wise, no blockers for my turn, opponent 3, and opponent 4's turn. We go back to your turn. You take the stun counters off. They're still tapped for my turn, opponent 3, and opponent 4's turn. It's ridiculous.
Right. It's extremely stupid. Honestly, I hate stun counters, but they exist, and so we have to go over them. We have to cover them.
Yeah, Lost in the Maze has got a lot of potential. Here's a new version of an old card, Jake.
Yeah, this reminds me of stuff like Stuffy Doll, Brash Taunter, that kind of stuff. It's like a black Brash Taunter, which is honestly really, really sexy. One black and 3 other for Barbedservator. It's a 1/1. That makes sense.
Sure.
Dies to nice stuff like -X, which is very important. Indestructible. When Barbedservator enters the battlefield, suspect it, which just means it has menace and it can't block.
And that's for good. There's been some confusion over suspect. It gets menace and can't block, and that's for good until a card says no longer suspected. Just a side note.
Yeah, whenever Barbedservator deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Sweet. And whenever it is dealt damage, target opponent loses that much life. I will block your 10/10 with my indestructible. Sweet, you lose 10. You should not have swung at me.
Go to my turn, attack with menace. I draw a card, lose a life.
Right.
It's just so much fun.
There's a lot going on here. This is probably Karavik territory here, because I do run Brash Taunter in that deck, and I just love effects like this. It's such a pesky card. It is easy to kill. Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares, Toxic Deluge.
But it doesn't die to Blasphemous Act. In fact, it wants to be Blasphemous Acted.
It doesn't die to any sort of destroy target creature or destroy the board. It's pesky. It's pesky. It takes specific removal to deal with it. It's absolutely easy to answer in certain situations, but it is really, really annoying to play against. I can already tell without it existing. It's very annoying.
Pesky little artifact creature. Case of the Stashed Skeleton is a pesky little case that is basically a demonic tutor. When this case enters the battlefield, you create a 2/1 black skeleton creature token and suspect it. You can solve this case by controlling no suspected skeletons. So sacrifice it. You can do it, I promise. And then, once it's solved, you can pay 2 mana, sack the case, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle at sorcery speed. This is just a rare demonic tutor being printed in 2024. And there's upside because you get a creature token that you can do some stuff with.
You can just swing with the token, and eventually your opponent has to figure out a way to block and kill it, or else it will kill them. I mean, in Commander, it's going to take a long time for a 2/1 to get there, but I guarantee you, if you suit it up and stuff, you're not going to have to figure out a way to sacrifice it yourself. Someone will deal with it. Then you will no longer control any suspected skeletons. What a concept. Make it a threat, and people will remove it, or remove it yourself.
Yeah, I just love how it turns into a D-tutor there at the end.
And then we have Massacra Girl Clown Killer.
Clone Killer.
I butchered that name on purpose. 2 black, 2 other for a 4/4. Legendary creature, human assassin. If anybody doesn't know, Massacra Grill came out in War of the Spark back in the day. And so this is a new version of Massacra Grill. Creatures you control have Wither. They deal damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters. Ooh. We were just talking about a card that dies by -1/-1 counters. So it's a strong effect. Stuff like Yawgmoth should come to mind. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, if its toughness was less than 1, draw a card. Yay!
Yeah.
Draw cards.
Look, and if we're withering our creatures on our opponent's side away, their toughnesses are going to be less than 1 because their toughnesses are going to be 0 when they die, because we have -1/-1 them to death. 4 mana, draw a card, 4/4 menace, 4 mana. Wow. Modern design is pushed. Outrageous Robbery. 2 black X. Instant speed. Target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library face down. Prosper has entered the chat. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. If you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast it. All right, Jake, you're done with your turn. Okay, my turn. All right, EOT. I'm going to Outrageous Robbery for 10. Exile the top 10 cards of your library face down. You can't look at them. And I get to go to those and cast whatever I want from them with mana of any color whenever I want to at the speed that those cards get played. This is silly, right? This is just shenanigans.
That seems realistic.
Yeah, it's just, this one's so ridiculous to me.
I don't even know what they think of these days, honestly. They just are like, how do we make stuff way more intense than it's already been? Yeah, this card is degenerate.
I know that I get
Pretty
super
crazy.
tilted when my stuff gets stolen or people are using my stuff that they've exiled off the top, you know, like Atali does. And just somebody chunking you for like 5, exile the top 5, and they get to cast them for the rest of the game. Play them, by the way. They can use your lands. Nothing is amiss. This is just such a silly expo.
You know what I wonder about this card as well, is if this is also CEDH territory, because most of the overlap on those decks is pretty strong, right? You're like, I want to play, everybody's playing Dockside Extortionist if you're in red, right?
Sure.
And so it's like, I want to play all of your tutors to go help me find my Adnaz or help me find my win condition, my Thoracle.
Yeah.
Or, holy shit, what if I accidentally exile your Thoracle? And now I'm winning with...
What if you vamp tutor and I get in there on the stack and yoink the card that you put on top of your library for 3 mana? And
you
now
could
that's
freaking
my
yoink
spell.
it for just 3 mana.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It can get silly, man. I think that this is a really busted card.
Yeah, it's one of those that has flexibility as well, because it's good early, it's good late. Outrageous Robbery.
Outrageous.
Look it's the whole, I'm not even taking the painting with me, but I will punch it on the wall. That way when you get here, not only will you see all your stuff is jacked and gone, but I've punched your painting on the wall. Insult to injury.
And Marty's got 3 knives in his back.
Oh, that guy's in trouble. Big trouble. Get him to a hospital. Thank you to all of our patrons. Our patrons really go a long way in helping us do this as a full-time thing. If you enjoyed this video, if you want to get involved on a deeper level, Patreon is a great way to do it. You can find a link in the description, as well as links to all of our sponsors that we mentioned earlier in the video.